Governor Scott Walker officially signed our next $66 billion biennial budget, which will take the state into mid-2013. And he joins me now to talk about it and his last-minute vetoes. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Jay, I'm outstanding.
Well, we've covered the basics of the budget numerous times over our preceding weeks and months. We know that it erases the $3.6 billion deficit and should leave us with $300 million in surplus. And I hope you and the GOP members get the credit that you deserve for ending the gimmicks and the trickery and that some past governors have used and actually balanced our budget. But rather than cover old ground, I thought we'd get right to the vetoes that some of my listeners are interested in.
Sure.
You know, chief among them, the craft brewing provision that was inserted as a protection for Miller Coors. The thought was it would keep our craft breweries from growing and expanding in some of the ways that they wanted to. You did not veto that provision, correct?
I did not.
Why not?
And actually, if you look at the facts on it, this is one of those where I've been scratching my head because when I first saw the same concern and I thought, okay, there's got to be something more to it. It certainly protects against InBev, which now owns Anheuser-Busch, coming in and taking a shot at Miller Coors, but it actually will help craft brewers grow. I mean, under the previous law, the cap under Wisconsin law was 50,000 barrels production was the most they could distribute. This actually, the budget language actually increases that to 300,000 barrels. So small breweries that want to grow, those microbreweries, those craft breweries, will actually be able to do more growth than they were in the past before the budget was put into effect. So it's one of the, and you compare it to other places, you know, other states, for example, Wisconsin will be 300,000 barrels. Minnesota, I think, is 25,000 barrels. Indiana is 30,000. Illinois is 15,000. Michigan doesn't allow any microbrewery to self-distribute. So in our case, we're actually going to be much more generous for microbreweries than anywhere across the country.
Well, why not, if it was controversial as it was, and you were getting some input from both sides, both from conservatives and liberals saying that this needs to be changed, why not just veto it and have the legislature take it up separately?
Well, again, in this case, because, and I even talked to some folks on Saturday night about this who raised a concern about it, and when I explained to them what was actually in what the legislature passed, they went, oh, that's different than what we thought. I think it was an example where you had a couple folks raise this as a concern, thought it was doing something more than it was. Now, people can long-term have a debate about a three-tier system one way or another, but this wasn't about adding or subtracting the three-tier system. This was about making a change to it, the change that in part protects Miller Coors, but the other part is, like I say, it goes from 50,000 barrels up to 300,000 barrels. That's actually going to be good for craft brewers.
You did not use your veto pen to expand the scope of school choice, which some of the educational establishment fretted over, but you did eliminate the enrollment cap on virtual schools. I mean, this is another way to educate kids that WEAC and the public school establishment has been fighting tooth and nail against.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, overall in this budget, even regardless of the vetoes, we looked to expand the number of options that parents had so that every kid in the state had access to great education. In Milwaukee, that meant taking a very successful school choice program for low-income families and expanding it to middle-class families to anywhere, not just in Milwaukee, but anywhere. And it meant including the city of Racine, the school district there, and parents having the option of sending their kids in the same way that Milwaukee parents have in the past, giving them that option. Long-term, I'd love to explore it elsewhere, particularly in districts where we've got great challenges and where parents need to have that option. But we kept to our word. We said there was concern in the budget process about going beyond Milwaukee and Racine. We said to go beyond that. But charter schools expand, virtual schools expand. Again, giving more people options ultimately works. And even with the choice schools, the growth in the choice schools in Milwaukee has helped the public schools get better because of the competition. And we also have put more mechanisms in to be able to track how students are performing. Because in the end, what I'd like to have is more kids around not only Milwaukee, but more kids around the state be able to have the experience that they do at schools like the Hope School or St. Marcus. St. Marcus is an example. Their kids test better not only than the Milwaukee public school system, their kids test better than the statewide average. That's the kind of education I want every kid to have.
Yeah, and virtual schools in Wisconsin do have a 90% satisfaction rate by parents. They produce test results that are at least on par with the public schools. And we were only allowing a few thousand families to do that. What was the cap that you eliminated?
Well, we lifted it and entirely remove it in the same way, similar to the 20,000 cap we had in Milwaukee, which is completely eliminated. And even with charters, we now allow, for example, universities will be able to charter, to be the chartering organization for a school option. Every case out there, and even the public schools, people forget the reforms that we passed earlier as part of the budget reform bill, will give schools in the public sector some of the same sorts of tools and techniques that have made many of these virtual, charter, and in some cases choice schools successful. So across the board, we're going to make education better in Wisconsin.
You vetoed the rule that would have had City of Milwaukee taxpayers paying fired police officers all of the way through their appeals process. I agree with that, but why did you veto it?
Well, that's one where that really doesn't have a fiscal impact. It's not a slight modification. I mean, that's a policy decision. I think it's worth having a debate and discussion outside of the budget process. It's one where it's a concern. Now, proponents of that would say they were applying the same standard that you have for all their police departments across the state of Wisconsin. So I understand why they said, well, if you're going to have it, let's have it on par with everybody. But my belief is that wasn't a fiscal impact. It really didn't belong in the budget, and so we kept that out.
Okay, there were 50 vetoes, and a lot of them were picky-uni little stuff that really don't need to be covered. I found this interesting, though. You rewrote a section that is going to allow, really it will require public employees to work for 5 years before qualifying for state pension benefits, rather than being gradually vested in over 5 years. What's the significance of that change? Is money savings? Or?
Yeah. Long-term, you get those sorts of things saying you should be vested in the system. It saves money, and it puts you in a better position. It's similar to what you have in many cases in the private sector. And obviously, it fits in the overall changes we made to make sure that we've got a system, not only when it comes to retirement, but just in general, hiring and firing based on merit, and pay based on performance. And in this case, there's a lot of benefits that were in place in the past that previous politicians gave, not at the state level, but I saw at the county level, gave at a time when they faced some budget challenges to avoid salary increases. Well, those things cost money, and we've seen it not only in government, we see it in the automobile industry, we've seen it in other companies that have gone through challenges, or other industries that have gone through challenges. And as I said yesterday, we can't keep racking up bigger and bigger credit card bills and hope to pass it on to our kids. We've got to cut up the credit cards now, pay the bills, and when we do that, this budget bill is really about the next generation and making sure that they inherit a Wisconsin even greater than the one we did, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Talking with Governor Scott Walker. So as much as you're bound to get bashed by the media because you're you, I see fairness in these vetoes in that you listened to a good number of the wishes of Tom Barrett and other Milwaukee and Madison area Democrats on certain things, as well as your conservative constituency on other things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at it in the end, we look at this bill. We took out, there was only one little one in there, so it's remarkable there was any. We took out the one thing you could argue was an earmark. We vetoed that out. Overall, there's no earmarks. There's no raids of segregated funds for things unrelated. So you don't have taking money out of the transportation fund and putting it in a completely different area. You don't have the illegal raid on the patient compensation fund and putting it in another area. What you have is a $3.6 billion budget deficit when we started. Now becomes a more than $300 million surplus throughout the end of this budget. You have a budget that freezes property taxes, that provides a net decrease in taxes overall, that puts greater incentives for manufacturing and agriculture interests to put more people to work in the private sector. It still provides a basic safety net, $1.2 billion. For all the talk about the poor, $1.2 billion, almost every bit of the new revenue we get in this budget goes to Medicaid to pay for things like Badger Care and providing for our seniors and providing for people with disabilities. We care for those programs out there. We just do so in a way that's cost effective, and we get back to our basic principles. We get back to the private sector creating jobs. We get back to things like public assistance and welfare reform that says, we'll help you, but if you're able-bodied, we're going to help you get back on your feet again, and then we're going to get you in the workforce. We're not going to let you live on the entitlement forever. And it says, in the end, we're going to allow schools and local governments, they have the tools they need to more than make up for any changes in the budget. That's why my school district, Wauwatosa, said they're going to cut the tax levy. They're actually going to restore the cuts, and they're going to have a quality education. We see that all across the state. All the talk of Armageddon is already, not even after the budget, but already in the last couple of weeks we're seeing it's just not going to happen because people are given tools, and those school districts and towns and counties and villages that are using them are going to be that much better.
Yeah, even
off.
those that rushed ahead are seeing the savings. Well, as of Wednesday, your collective bargaining changes and other budget fixes do officially take effect, and the monumental work of your first 6 months of tenure is going to be done. Some have to already be asking, where do you go from here, Governor? Do you have more grand plans, or have you accomplished a lot of your major agenda items right off the bat here in 6 months?
Well, we got a lot done. Balancing a budget without a tax increase, and in some ways, think about it. For the next 2 years, we effectively have a property tax freeze. That's going to be incredibly important, not only for property owners, residents, but for business owners. But as much as things are better, 7.4% unemployment is much better than the country, much better than others in the Midwest. We're heading the right direction. Employers, 10% of them a year ago said we're in the right direction. 88% say we are now. The majority say they're going to add more jobs. Our rankings in terms of jobs went from 41 up to 24. All those things are great. But in the end, until you get to families like I mentioned, Tina, a woman that emailed me from Green Bay a few weeks ago, has got a family of 4, soon to be 5. People like her are saying she appreciates our work to balance the budget, and she hopes that our efforts to improve the economy will continue, because families like hers, where her husband lost his job a year ago and where he's been working in a job, a little bit more like a part-time job, they need to get back on their feet again. And there's families like that all across the state. We've got to do everything in our power to help the private sector, not the government, the private sector, create more jobs. Mm-hmm. And so when the legislature comes back, we're going to be pushing for more things that help drive the economy here in the state of Wisconsin.
A listener wants to know when you're going to sign the concealed carry bill.
Timing-wise, we haven't picked an exact date. My thought is, this week is the focus on the budget and the vetoes. Probably wait till after Independence Day, but shortly thereafter, will appropriately be the 49th state, and only Illinois will be left not having some sort of a concealed carry law.
Yeah, we were both at a Washington County event on Saturday, and you were impressing upon the crowd just how important these recall elections are coming up. We need to support, we need to reward lawmakers when they take the courageous stances, because this really is a critical time now. We are going to be able to determine the path of Wisconsin here within the month and a half that it's going to take to get these recalls done.
Well, you have right here, it's been interesting just to look at this objectively. You have national labor union bosses from Washington talking about pulling money out of their support for congressional candidates and putting up their words to $25 million in Ohio to try and defeat to push a referendum that would defeat the measure they passed earlier this year there, and a similar amount in the state of Wisconsin for recall elections. That is a tremendous. That is more money than we've ever seen come in for any special elections in the state of Wisconsin. So 9 races, 20 to 25 million. That's a tremendous amount, and I think the grassroots of the state certainly has to look at that and say, are we going to let people come in from other states with money outside of Wisconsin and impact these elections? And it's unfortunate, because I look at this and say, this is taking the eye off the ball here. The fact of the matter is, while we're getting better, we still got a long ways to go with the economy, and these recalls are taking us off the focus that we need to have, not only amongst Republicans. Bob Ziegelbauer, the one independent, and a number of Democrats in the past have voted for a very aggressive pro-job, pro-small business agenda. We need to get back to that. And my hope is we can get through in a quick fashion these recalls and continue to do the good work to create more jobs in the private sector.
Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. I've already kept you too long.
Good to be with you, Jay.
Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker joining me this morning, talking about the budget that he signed into law officially yesterday.